Sharing, Sabrina. Did you want to share something?
No worries. No need for me to have the screen. I just wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is the third part in our awesome series about Anypoint Platform featuring Aston and his wonderful PMs. Today, he's going to cover MuleSoft monitoring. Really excited for you all to see this session. I just wanted to do a quick housekeeping. The chat is open. I have also opened the Q&A tab. Please put any questions you have in the Q&A tab so that Aston and I can make sure that we answer as many as possible at the end of this session. You can find the Q&A tab on the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and we will get started. So I'm going to go off screen. I'm here, Aston, if you need anything. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Sabrina, and welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join the session today. Just to introduce myself very briefly, my name is Aston Whiteling. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at MuleSoft, and I cover the platform services of which the monitoring capabilities are a part. And in today's session, I'm going to be giving you a kind of broad remit of like how MuleSoft thinks about monitoring, what our monitoring capabilities are. Got some product screens for you so you can see what's happening in the product too, and then we'll even talk a little bit about AI. So yeah. This is the agenda, so just drilling into kind of what I just said in more detail. I'm going to kick things off by talking about the importance of monitoring to begin with, why, or like MuleSoft's view on it, and then the expectation placed on modern observability tools, kind of building on that importance and that growing importance of monitoring and observability as a capability. Then get into the good stuff, the juicy stuff. I'm going to give you an overview of the various different aspects of MuleSoft that encompass monitoring and observability capabilities. I'm going to particularly spotlight tracing and kind of our telemetry exporter or open telemetry, which are one of our newer marquee features that we're really excited about. And at the end, I'm going to do a little bit of thought leadership and just kind of tell you some of the trends with AI and observability and how that's going to impact specifically distributed tracing or how they're going to work together. So that's the agenda. And yeah, I really hope you enjoy the session today. So as I said, I'm going to kick off by talking about the importance of monitoring and observability. And I always start these discussions with this quote. This is from a random Medium article that I found when I first joined MuleSoft. But I found it really illuminating in the sense of like getting to the heart of the problem and like why monitoring is so important. Some of you on the call might be developers who've dealt with these Sev1 like production errors with all these people breathing down your necks. One of the many reasons I think I'm not a developer, like this sounds incredibly stressful. My hat's off to developers who have to deal with things like this. But yeah, I think it really illustrates like the stress that's involved with monitoring and observability. I think the crux of it and the problem that needs to be solved is like dealing with situations like this. And I think this is becoming more important because networks and application networks, API integrations, they don't really look like this anymore, you know, unless this is like day 3 of your startup. The joke I always make is like, you know, gyms are hiring full stack developers, and like mum and dad shops or mom and pop stores, I should say, like they have, you know, full one-tap payment systems. Like we've talked about digital transformation for the past decade, for as long as I've been in tech. But I really feel like we are actually crossing that chasm, and smaller businesses and large businesses alike getting these really complicated networks. And yeah, so they don't really look like this anymore, at least from a scale perspective. They're starting to look more like this. You know, vast interconnected application networks that are across different teams, different business units, geographies, what have you, that are creating this kind of exponential challenge for monitoring and observability and keeping track of, you know, what's happening in the health of your application architecture. And is it any wonder, so I also like to pull this stat out as well, because of that rising complexity, is it any wonder that 73% of companies reporting an increase, reported a mean time to restore of greater than 1 hour? There was a little bit of time where MTTR was, you know, hovering at a pretty respectable time, and that's only gone up, you know, as the complexities of these technologies and these networks has increased. So what I'm trying to say and illustrate by bringing this up is, you know, it's very much top of mind, I think, for a lot of technical and IT teams across the spectrum. So with that in mind, what is the expectation placed on modern observability tools? And this is kind of the MuleSoft take. So when trying to refine that, this is how we think about it. We think they should be insightful, you know, meaningful data points and analysis, not just a token screen, you know, here's the latency of your request, you know, do with it what you will. They need to have very much insightful, rich data that can help you get to that root problem analysis quicker and really understand what's going on in these sprawling application networks. They need to be comprehensive, and what I mean by that, it covers the entire life cycle of whatever your integration or end-to-end application management strategy is. From start to finish, you need to have insight every step of the way, so it's a more manageable approach to dealing with problems when they arise. And finally, they need to be extensible, and that means part of the wider observability ecosystem. Observability is its own segment essentially in the tech industry. There's a variety of different tools, and it's the benefit of everyone when they all play well together, and you can create this rich ecosystem of powerful monitoring tools. And with that in mind, we think our customers want to, and our users want to kind of have their cake and eat it too. And why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you have your cake and eat it too? You're all great. You're fantastic people. And what I mean when I say have your cake and eat it too in this regard is that within MuleSoft, we know you want that rich data. You want to have at your fingertips when you're in Mule applications. You want to be able to have that rich data, and that needs to expand from everything MuleSoft does in its portfolio. From your API management. All the way to usage, things like that of that nature. But also the eating it too part is that we need to play with these these other vendors and be part of this ecosystem. Your Datadogs, your Dynatraces, your Splunks. We want to be part of that ecosystem. We can stand on our own. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. We think we have the monitoring capabilities to be part of that conversation, but we don't see these these aren't necessarily competitors. They're partners, and we want to be part and play well within that ecosystem. So with that in mind, actually, one second, I'm just going to pause. Hi, supporter. Apologies, a lot of talking. So with that in mind, MuleSoft monitoring, I'm going to give you an overview of the kind of journey and what we think of in the application, the different steps along this process and this monitoring experience. So it's really an end-to-end. I kind of touched on this already. It's an end-to-end API and integration lifecycle monitoring experience. We want it to be from the start when you first deploy things into MuleSoft all the way to the end of bringing it out and moving it to these different applications. And that's what I'm going to show you today. So I'm going to build up this slide very gradually so you can see the kind of journey that we've defined. And it starts with deployments. So that's the very first step. It's about governance and deployments of your APIs and your apps that you're deploying onto MuleSoft. We have a new feature that's coming out called API Insights, which is really going to help make this process a lot easier. And this is generally something that would be used maybe by an InfoSec sort of persona. So API Insights, this API governance, this is a one-stop shop for a complete breadth view of your APIs. It's coming out, I think maybe end of Q2, early Q3. It's an out-of-the-box dashboard that lets you easily understand the state of the union of your APIs, various different analytics and metrics that give you actionable ways to improve the outlay of your APIs that are deployed and across your entire ecosystem, not just within MuleSoft. So that's the idea. These are just some product screens. I don't have the full dashboard yet because it's still a work in progress. But if we drill into what these screens are actually saying, you can see the different APIs you have by the different environments. You can see whether they're governed, if they're in policy. You can see if there's any that are missing documentation, which ones are protected, which ones are public, the security of them. So it's really, as I say, that broad spectrum view of all of your different APIs together. And if you move to the screen on the right, I was talking about the left just then, moving to the right, once your APIs, if they are being governed within MuleSoft, you can then take that next step of a granular view and you can say, okay, are they in policy? Which policies are they part of? What's the severity of that? How much of a risk of that is to us? How long has it been? How long has this been the case? You can start formulating that broad spectrum strategy when you're first bringing your APIs and starting to manage them within MuleSoft. So that's step one. That's where we start the journey. Once you've got that understanding, the breadth, you want to maybe narrow it down a little bit. And the next step of that is something we like to call architectural. That's visualizing, understanding in a more concrete sense, the relationships that are happening in these very complicated and comprehensive networks. We have a tool for that within Anypoint Monitoring called Anypoint Visualizer, which is a tool that kind of a system architect might traditionally use. So Anypoint Visualizer, it's in the name, it's pretty nail on the head. It's a tool that lets you visualize the different application and API interactions that are happening and occurring across your Mule deployments. Lets you quickly pinpoint performance issues, start identify bottlenecks, and also something that's perhaps underrated when you're talking in these monitoring conversations, aligning architecture with business goals. The business side perhaps doesn't understand the nuance of the technical complexity. Having something that's visual like this that lets you quickly illustrate in a visual manner how your networks are interacting and what the opportunity costs, or whatever conversation you want to have around that architecture, having that for the business is a really powerful tool in your back pocket when you're having those conversations. So what does this tool look like? So can say, for example, we're continuing the journey that we just had from API governance. We drill in, we want to have a look at a specific API relating to our policies. That's what we're looking at right now. This is the visualization. You can see our policies in the dropdown. We also can filter by these different policies. If we're looking on specifically, you can filter by like security. If you look on the left, actually, I think I highlight it. Yeah, you can filter things like security, the quality of service, etc. And you can also filter, by production. You can filter by different environments specifically within production, different tags, etc. There's a search bar there as well. So you can really, again, we've taken that broad view from the governance, and we're bringing it in and starting to understand, I guess, the nuance of that application relevance. And this isn't just, with policies, you can see the drop down here. You can switch through to architecture. You can have this view in regards to troubleshooting as well. I guess that's kind of the next step. Like if you want to troubleshoot a specific application based on the context that you're defining, or like that's drove you here, you can do that right from the visualizer too. So if you want to click into a single application, you can just click it, opens up this monitoring thing, and you can kind of dive into endpoint monitoring. And that's actually the next step in our journey. So monitoring, this is the out and out, the traditional monitoring, I guess you could say, like that's trend analysis, traditional observability, understanding the different health and aspects of, performance aspects of your application ecosystem. And of course, the marquee product for that is endpoint monitoring. As I said, the marquee product that MuleSoft offers in regards to monitoring. And this is kind of like a dev tool, or my IT ops tool, but interesting data for everyone. So yeah, endpoint monitoring, what is it? In a more granular detail, it's performance analytics, extensive API views. You can really slice and dice, and understand the insights and performance of your applications that are deployed via MuleSoft. It's got custom dashboards and alerts as well, so you can customize. It's got a bunch of baked-in analytics, but you can also customize it to suit your business needs. Get alerts based on those analytics and different thresholds, so that it's proactive and you can deal with those issues. And endpoint insights as well. This is a newer tool that we released in beta back in March, and back in March, I believe, yes. And this is the ability to really slice and dice again by the filters and production instances, different environments, so you can again get to the data that you want to see to inform your monitoring practices. So we're into endpoint monitoring now. We've just, this again, continuing the journey. We just clicked into that API, if you recall, the one we're trying to look at, and we're trying to understand its performance in the context of, those different policies. For example, this is the monitoring dashboard. As you can see, you've got a variety of different ways you can slice and dice it. I'm going to say on the overview, what you'd expect, different messages, response times, etc. As I touched on before, custom dashboards, they are possible. I'm not going to show custom dashboards today, but I like to highlight it. And I do this because I just want to reiterate, this is a fully fledged monitoring tool, a monitoring platform. As I say, we can stand up on our own two legs, as well as play with that ecosystem. But you can create, whatever you need within endpoint monitoring to cater to your needs. Where I'm going to go next, actually, to continue the story, is this area called functional monitoring. So I click into functional monitoring. This is a really cool feature, part of endpoint monitoring. This is the way to essentially schedule a report or a specific bit of insight for a given API on a set of dependencies or requirements that you can create. So you can say, I want to create a test to understand the health of a particular API endpoint. I want to schedule it to recur, this often, and I want that report then to be sent to me. So you can have that proactive sort of understanding of a performance of an API based on this recurring sort of alerting, I guess you could call it. So just a cool area I wanted to highlight. Back to endpoint monitoring, the core dashboard where we just were. I'm going to switch across now to endpoint insights over here. So again, this is a beta feature that we announced back in March. This is a stepped out view again. So we've gone quite granular with the troubleshooting and the process we were trying to do. We've pulled out a little bit again, and we can see kind of the wider spectrum of the monitoring that's occurring within endpoint monitoring for our environment. And this is production. You can see the number of entities with error, the requests, the different volumes of errors and how those requests are proliferating across your application network. And as I said, we're searching at the moment by production, but the power of this is you can really slice and dice again by those different environments or by different tags, by specific environments if you want to see that data as well. So again, it's extensive and you can really slice and dice so you can understand what you want to understand when you're performing these monitoring capabilities. But you can go granular again. If you see at the bottom, there's that entities list. So if we were to click into one of them at the bottom, this is the API we were just looking at, and we can also just like view those metrics as well. And that takes us back to where we were just looking at. Okay, next slide. So that's our journey so far, moving away from this kind of interconnected narrative a little bit. What about when incidents occur? Like what about incident management? That's kind of the next step of this process. If something goes wrong and you need to deal with it proactively, or if something's breaking, you need to be able to deal with those outages quickly and have a process in place to address that. Again, this is endpoint monitoring, a core feature of endpoint monitoring, probably done by a developer. Again, calling back to the quote that I started this presentation with. So this is the other side of endpoint monitoring. We had the more strategic, broad view previously. This is the nit and grit of dealing with actual incidents and really digging into the problem as well. A lot of it's about distributed tracing. I'm going to highlight that in a later section, as I said, but just to give you an idea, it's a tool that lets you get that holistic network view, really break down the different steps of requests and applications, get that faster root cause analysis based off of that insight, and also kind of plan your strategy. Having that holistic understanding of all the requests that move through lets you be a bit more strategic at when the dust settles and you've solved incidents and you say, okay, what do we need to refactor? So this is what it looks like. Here's the trace overview. This is the overview page. You can see all the different requests that you're tracing. This is a sample of traces. I'll talk about that in a future bit as well, and why we sample the sampling issue. But you sample of all a set of requests that are going through your network, and if you see any recurrent errors, you can really dig into them. So I was to click into a specific request. This is what it looks like. Again, I'm going to break down like this view if you're not familiar with tracing in more detail in a little bit. But essentially, this is just the entire request that's moving through. It's the time, and then every app that it stops along the way. We also have a set of metadata that goes with that, and you can drill into the specifics of that app as well. So if I were to drill into this one, it opens up. This is the request. You can see a variety of different metadatas. And what I think is really cool is that you can just drill into the logs right here as well. So this is where the paradigm is shifting a little bit from your traditional monitoring and kind of incident management process. Again, I'll get into that in a little bit. If we click into the logs, I think this is a perhaps underappreciated and really cool aspect of the MuleSoft monitoring capabilities. You can pull all of these logs together. It's not going to lots of different apps. All your applications that are being monitored within MuleSoft, you're centralizing where those logs are. You can see the detail of your logs. I don't think reading logs is anyone's favorite task, but it's all centralized. It makes that process a lot easier, and you can see that broad spectrum and really dive in with the filters and the view. Again, it's got all you can search through them as well. It's got all that sort of enterprise capability, I guess you could call it. I just like to highlight the alerts over here. So going to if we went to alerts, of course, you're probably familiar with the concepts of alerts. And I know it's such an important thing when having these conversations, because they're kind of the lifeblood of when you're dealing with different issues. And it's no different in MuleSoft. You can open up an alert, you can name it, you can say the severity, you can define the threshold characteristics of that alert. So yeah, it's there. You can be proactive, deal with those issues as they arise with your performance. So that's incident management. Next up is usage. Again, something that's probably not thought of out and out as a traditional monitoring capability, but something that we're really invested in. And I definitely think it's part of this story. Understanding your usage and throughput for your Mule applications, your data, definitely part of that monitoring conversation. And as I say, this end-to-end lifecycle. And we actually have a usage dashboard that would be used, I guess, traditionally by IT ops, maybe some finance people in there as well, depending. But yeah. This is a dashboard that we offer that gives you daily and monthly data throughput. It's got an API and a CSV export as well. And this was an effort that we spun up to align with our new usage-based pricing model. So we've got the new usage UBP for MuleSoft, and this is an effort to kind of align and make the data that's involved with that a little bit easier. So the daily usage dashboard is in beta right now with the GA, hopefully in Q3. We have the monthly dashboard that's available right now, completely GA. But for the daily, for the more granular, that's something that's in beta. And we also have the API to get that data out. That is also in beta. What's something that's a little bit cooler and that's got a slightly further down the line target is this sort of wider usage dashboard to give you your understanding of like the usage of your apps, not just in terms of throughput, but like how apps are being reused across your application network, how many of them are governed, etc. It's just this broad view to understand how Mule is actually being used across your organization, different business units, for example, etc. It's a really exciting prospect. So yeah, we're aiming for that around Q4. And then finally, the exports. I've talked about it a little bit already, just being part of that ecosystem. We want easy export to third-party ecosystems. We're an integration tool, so you should expect that, but we want it to be even easier, or the easiest it can possibly be, and that is catered to by what we call telemetry exporter, which is, again, a tool probably used by like a developer or an IT ops person. So this is built on OpenTelemetry. Again, I keep referencing what's happening in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about why that's important if you aren't aware, but OpenTelemetry is a standard basically that all the big observability tools use in order to stream observability data, so you can export your traces or your logs to your Datadogs, to your Dynatraces, Splunk, etc. And what we want to highlight is that this is a kind of a configure once and you get real-time telemetry. So I think it's maybe because we called it telemetry exporter. So maybe that gives the impression that it's not real-time, but it is. It can be near real-time. So to those third-party tools, it's streaming this telemetry data based on your logs. And it's really easy, logs and traces, sorry. And it is really easy to configure. It's just like a setup in the configuration. You do it once and you have that live streaming data. And yeah, as I say, because of this, we like to think that Mule is really trying to be part of that observability conversation, being part of that ecosystem. This is what it looks like. I won't set up a connection now, but essentially just so you have an idea, it's in Anypoint Monitoring. It's on one of the sidebar tools. You just need to set up your connection, all UI driven, set up the connection between apps, your different endpoints, say whether you want it to just be the traces that are going, just the logs, and then you define that configuration as well. And that is the entire journey. So there we are. That's how we're at least starting to think about MuleSoft monitoring in this end-to-end lifecycle, all the way from deployments through to like your traditional monitoring, usage being part of that conversation as well. And then, yeah, you're exporting to your observability ecosystem. So I wanted to spotlight, as I said, I've been referencing it as I've just gone. I just want to also dive into it a little bit more, because these are the tracing and OpenTelemetry. They're very much marquee new features for us. We're really excited about them. We're investing heavily in them as concepts. So I just wanted to double tap into why that is and why we're so keen on them. Oops, skipped already. So if in case you aren't aware, OpenTelemetry is actually the second biggest cloud native computing foundation project, in terms of number of contributors. That's right after Kubernetes. So I'm sure everyone's heard of Kubernetes. OpenTelemetry is right on its heels in terms of support within the community. So a lot of uptake, a lot of excitement, and it's only going to get, I think, more mature as that contribution continues. And the way I like to think about tracing, this is an analogy I've used. I know I talked a little bit about it when we were looking at the actual product. So I'm taking a step back, using a bit of an analogy here to help you understand. I like to think of tracing as like a plumbing analogy. So you have your data flowing into your system and moving across your different applications like this. And then, if something goes wrong, you have your metrics and logs. That's the traditional way to look at it. You kind of have a rupture and you're like, okay, let's solve backwards and try and figure out what's going on here. Tracing is like adding a little bit of dye to the water and having it proliferate through that system. And that's how it works that was the analogy. This is how it works in practice. Again, we saw this a little bit in the application, but just for more context, the request pass on the left, that request moves between different applications. A metadata header is pinned to each of those to that request as it moves through each application. And that is what we can see in app, in MuleSoft, and on the right, we've also visualized it. So you can see that metadata, and then the entire span of that is what we actually refer to as a distributed trace. And this is like a paradigm shift, I would say, in the way we think about monitoring, because it's essentially saying that requests are more valuable as a unit of measure than events, like traditional events like metrics and logs. Why is that? Well, requests, because of that complexity of the network I've been talking about today, requests are more indicative of the user experience when making a request of an application. It's this broad view, it's interconnected, you can kind of see the forest for the trees. Whereas with metrics, and logs, they're subjective. You get a few different people in a room and say, what do the metrics say? They're going to give you a different answer. Same with logs, with developers, it can be a hotly debated topic. And they're disjointed. It's hard to see the forest from the trees in these complex architectures when you're looking at, specific metrics and specific apps. And that's kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here as well, like that metrics, you're getting that kind of broad view by looking at a collection of metrics together. But you're not getting the depth. And with logs, if you're drilling into specific, applications, reading the logs, again, you're not perhaps getting that wider context. Tracing is really the marrying of those two components of the monitoring and observability process. You're getting that broad view and that deep view as well. And this has led to, I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about like the new monitoring process, but the monitoring process has changed when you include traces. Step one now becomes look at your trace data. That is the first port of call if you're trying to deal with an incident. You look at your trace data, and based off of that trace data, you determine the teams that are involved and the microservices that are affected. Then you kind of revert to the traditional process. Okay, now let's use the logs, let's use the metrics to kind of wrangle this problem, get it under control, and attempt the solution. So that's kind of the first change. And then the second change is that you have this tail with this wider context that traces provide. You have this new ability with this wider context to ask these strategic questions. Again, the dust settles and you can say, okay, that issue that we just had with our infrastructure, what have you, our applications, our APIs, was it more like a strategic thing? Was it more of a specific operational thing? If it's strategic, you can kind of orient your strategy around fixing it. With metrics, you can use metrics as like a strategic tool. But if it was more operational, maybe it's a specific application or a specific instance that's really causing those issues, then you can go into logs. You can understand, is this something we need to replace? Is this just something we need to fix? So it changes the initial process at the start, and then it also gives you this like tail end view. So that's why this is such like a powerful new paradigm within the world of monitoring and observability. And as I said, this is really important. I kind of touched on this again already, but in microservice architectures, different teams own different services. There's lots of different moving parts, especially in these like super complex networks. Tracing makes it clear where the error occurs and which team is responsible. And I apologize because I'm going to reuse some slides a little bit here. But yeah, just to reiterate, networks don't look like this anymore. They look like this. So, and this is why the idea of tracing is actually so important, is to be able to understand holistically, see the forest of the trees, and then, orient your strategy around that when you're fixing issues. Oops. And again, to just reusing slides, I don't know why that just appeared, but yeah, MuleSoft wants to be part of that conversation. We want to work with these other vendors. We want to be part of this, ecosystem, and that's why we've made this, huge investment in the tracing and the telemetry exporter. So give me 1 sec. I actually just need to send a message to a special guest who might be coming in 5 minutes or so. So I switch back. Okay. So yeah, AI and observability. Thanks for sticking with me so far. Again, this is the kind of thought leadership piece of this talk. So I'm going to flash this up. Some of you might have seen this before. This is our forward-looking statement. Essentially, don't make purchase decisions off of a roadmap. But also just to say, like, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about, I will say whether it is in MuleSoft if it's part of the product, but some of this is more like conceptual and just me trying to talk to you all about, what I've learned about AI and like the paradigm shift that's going to happen in AI with distributed tracing. So what problems will AI help solve? The first one I like to call, and this is all, just to reiterate, this is all in the context of distributed tracing, which I've just spoken about. The configuration issue. So essentially right now, one of the barriers to entry when you want to get started with distributed tracing is that you need to set up every single application to pass that trace as it moves forward. So you need some kind of code agent to move through, because the way tracing works is kind of an economies of scale game, where if you only have a small segment of your applications, you're only going to get a small segment of the value. To get the most out of tracing, you need to have your entire network set up to handle traces as they move across. And this is easier said than done when your network looks something like this. Adding like a code agent to this, it can be a real challenge. But MuleSoft has actually solved this already. So if you do do tracing with MuleSoft and you deploy it via Cloud Hub 2 or RTF, which are the solution or platforms that currently can handle the tracing, this is already done for you. If it's set up in Cloud Hub or RTF, Cloud Hub 2, I should say, or RTF, traces are automatically enabled. So we've already removed a big barrier of entry there with getting started for tracing. But what would I say? Is best practice to run all your applications in MuleSoft? Yes, of course, I have to say that. But I appreciate that everyone uses different technologies. You're not perhaps run everything in MuleSoft. So in that scenario, in the future, because of the proliferation of technologies like AI, there are these new no-code setup agents for these complex microarchitectures. OpenTelemetry actually has an automated instrumentation tool already. It's a little bit rudimentary, but with the advances in this technology and like the ability to proliferate through these networks and these large data sets, in the next few years, this isn't going to be so much of an issue. The sampling issue. So I referenced this earlier. And this is industry practice for distributed tracing. It's not just a MuleSoft thing. Because of the complexity of trace data and the number of requests that are moving across these application networks, in order for performance, for performance reasons, I should say, you need to kind of take a sample of that and not use the whole request data set. You can, but again, might be some performance issues. So you have your random sample. Of that random sample, you have like traces of interest, and those are the ones that you'll then go into in the application, like the demo I just went through, and kind of do the legwork of understanding what's going wrong. I'd actually say, but sorry, I meant before I move on to the next one, I'd like to say that like if you think about it, the only thing you really care about are the traces where things are going wrong. Like most of the data set is not particularly relevant when you're trying to solve issues. You just care about those traces of interest. But in order to get those traces of interest, to get all of them, you have to pull out all traces. And that's going to be a huge data set, which is traditionally something that has been quite a challenge to comb through these data sets of this complexity. But what are the technologies that are very prominent right now that are good at going through large data sets? I'm of course talking about large language models. So it's not infeasible in the near future that you'll have some kind of co-pilot LLM that will let you use that natural language to prompt all of the traces that you're capturing. So you can say, hey, I want to see all the requests with above average latency, which ones through errors and exceptions. And like obviously we all know the benefit of these large language models is you can kind of build on your prompts and you can say, okay, what's the intersection of those that like had above average payloads? Whatever you need, if you're, again, to go to the breathing down your neck analogy, like, if something's Sev1, this is a great tool. You don't have to go to the logs. You can just say, hey, what's going on? I need this. This is what's the problem is. Can you help me, please, AI? And it will. So finally, the trace enrichment issue. So at the moment, because of the complexity of trace data sets and like the performance issues that can be incurred when capturing complex data like a trace, they're fairly light in terms of what's actually being captured, like things like latency, exception, payload details. But because of the issue of these large data sets going away, and storing them, it's not infeasible that in the future traces are going to be able to capture a lot more data. They can, within the trace itself, they'll have metadata for logs, metrics, maybe Kubernetes, like pod states, pretty much anything you could need for to troubleshoot an issue. So with that in mind, I'd like to say, imagine, if you will, close your eyes. We don't actually have to close your eyes, but imagine in the near future, you want to set up tracing, so you just have either you run everything in MuleSoft, it's already done, but if not, you have a no-code agent that just goes through and sets up, your entire network to handle traces. Those traces that are being captured, they have all this rich data, everything you could possibly need, and then something goes wrong. You switch onto your Copilot LLM and you just ask it and you use your natural language to say, this is the issue. How do we solve that? And with that in mind, essentially, this is everything a developer will ever need to debug a software issue. And again, with that in mind, traces have the potential to be the access around which the modern world of monitoring and observability is built. And that's why we're so excited about it. Again, this is all safe harbor statement I just showed you. Not all of this is in the roadmap or anything. This is just something I find really interesting for the future. But of course, with the AI company at Salesforce, so it's something we're definitely thinking about as well. And that is everything I wanted to talk to you about today. So I'm just going to close out. If I stop sharing, there we go. And Sabrina is the special guest. Has he joined? I think he has. He's messaged me on Slack. But he has just joined. His name's Rajesh.
There he is. Awesome. Let me add you, Rajesh. There you go.
So, hey everyone, I just wanted to take this time. There's a special guest joining from a workshop. He might not be here. He's making an appearance. This is Rajesh Shroff. He is the new product manager for Anypoint Monitoring. He's been, how long have you been here now, Rajesh? A few weeks, a month?
3 weeks, I would say.
3 weeks, yeah. But it's already been great working with you. I've already really enjoyed it, and really excited to have you. So I just wanted to bring you on here to say, hey, maybe you can introduce yourself actually.
No, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Aston and Sabrina, for giving me this chance. Hey, everyone, Rajesh Shroff. I have been, as Aston said, I've been with MuleSoft for about 3 weeks now. So getting a hang of things and learning the ropes. But I've been with Salesforce for about 2.5 years now. So I do understand the landscape and the layout. But yeah, I'm the director of product management. I've been in product management for more than a decade now. So happy to be here, happy to collaborate. And once I get the grip, once I'm fully onboarded, I'll be interacting a lot more with you folks here. So
fabulous. And I actually, Rajesh, I put you on the spot here, but the reason I wanted to bring you in is because we have some questions as well, potentially from our audience. So I was hoping that you could also help me out potentially. I know I probably pull rank in terms of how long I've been here, but maybe we can workshop some of them together. So yeah, I wanted to switch to the Q&A if that's okay.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a ton of questions. I'm going to start. I see there's questions in the chat, so I make sure I get to everyone's. Can you please copy paste your questions and put them in the Q&A tab if you haven't already? It is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I just want to make sure I get to them, and sometimes the chat is difficult. So the first one in the Q&A is there a licensing component needed to use Anypoint Visualizer? Can it be linked to CMDB tools for relationship mapping?
I think so. This, for me, I don't think there's a license. This is Anypoint Visualizer is part of Anypoint Monitoring. So if you have Anypoint Monitoring, it should be included within that. I don't know about the CMB tools actually for relationship mapping. That's not something I'm familiar with.
Okay, the next one is, are you planning to add natural language queries against all the monitoring data?
It's definitely not on the roadmap as of yet. That's why I was trying to say at the end there, but it's a half answer, but with the AI company, it's something we're thinking about in conversation, but not necessarily the roadmap as of yet.
Okay, the next one is, what are the overheads for traces collection? Will it slow down performance of my API?
I can share some thoughts.
Yeah, you take that.
This is something I got right roped in when I just started. So yes, there will be an overhead. Just to be very clear, as of now, we have introduced 10% sampling. We are also evaluating higher rates, but be aware that, in fact, I can share a high-level number. We are looking at about 7 to 8% CPU utilization increase with the 10% sampling. So there will be a performance hit. We are not expecting our customers to be running 100% sampling at 100% of the time, but acknowledge the fact that there will be certain scenarios where you might need 100% sampling. So we are evaluating that. It's in the works to see what kind of CPU hits and performance hits we will take if 100%. So yeah, acknowledge the question and be on the lookout.
Great. And the next one is, how much data will be returned in the exported Excel file? Any possible way to monitor the API based on contracts and endpoint level?
I think this is a question about the usage dashboard, if I'm not mistaken. Could you repeat that question actually, Sabrina?
Yeah.
Sorry.
How much data will be returned in the exported Excel file? Any possible way to monitor the API based on contracts and endpoint level?
I actually don't know. Maybe if that was about the usage, I think it's going to cover, you can filter by like environment or instance, I think, is how it's, and that might also be a question about API governance. I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to get back to you. Rajesh isn't actually the PM covering Anypoint or API insights, so I'll get back to you if we could write that one down. Sabrina, I'll find out.
Okay. I'm just going to copy it and then Slack it to you right now, Aston, so we don't forget it. Okay, and then the next question is, if trace parent is sent by users as part of header, is Mule able to pick trace ID from trace parent and use it for distributed tracing?
Is that something you know, Rajesh?
Yes, yeah, that is correct. In fact, okay. As much as I figured for the support of tracing, distributed tracing here, that is precisely the idea, to have the trace ID flow through and pick up and utilize. In fact, to a slightly different thought, we are also looking at correlating, using the trace ID, correlating the ensuing logs as well. So the answer is yes.
Great. The next one is, does any data get used for your model training?
I don't think so. No, we're not using the data at the moment. Again, the bit at the end talking about those models, it's just a thought leadership piece. We're not using any of that data at the moment for training.
Okay, the next one, does Anypoint Partner Manager support tracing? If not, are there any plans around it?
I've heard this question a few times, actually, whenever partner manager and monitoring gets brought up. There aren't any plans at the moment. I think it's a potential ongoing conversation. There's conversations around the monitoring capabilities and all of the MuleSoft products and even Salesforce products as well, but nothing concrete as of yet. It's still just in the realm of Anypoint monitoring.
Great.
So go for it.
Mm-hmm.
No, quick note. I just got a 3% warning on my laptop.
Okay. Cool. Jess might have to drop. Yeah, I'll try and answer the rest.
Sabrina, I'll just skip to one question I see on the Q&A about what are the plans to get distributed tracing onto CH1.
Perfect.
It's not. We will not do that. So we are all our energies as of now are focused on CH2. So we will not be bringing any new functionality or feature set onto CH1.
Sure. Okay. The last time this came up, actually, in fact, I remember when I showed this, someone said they're really trying to get us to Cloud Hub 2. And yes, we are. We really want you. That's another thing I cover is the Cloud Hub transition. Unrelated, but we have a Cloud Hub 2 migration tool coming out this year. We'd really like our customers to start thinking about migrating from Cloud Hub 1 to Cloud Hub 2 because of all the innovation that is on Cloud Hub 2. And in fact, another plug, there's a webinar, community webinar coming up in 2 weeks about that exact topic, which I'm hosting alongside the PM and a community member. So
yes, let me send that in the chat right now. This link here is to the meetup about Cloud Hub 2.0 if you are interested. Okay, next question we have is, what are the requirements to use these features?
There are no requirement. I mean, apart from just having Anypoint monitoring, that you can, there's a variety of different features. Sorry, let me just get the slide up again so I can make sure I'm keeping myself honest, because I talked about things that are in an Anypoint monitoring aren't. So let me just do that. What was this? Monitoring. Apologies. There it is. Okay. So of all the features I outlined, sorry. Okay, got my slide. In fact, I can share it again. Why don't I just do that? So everyone knows what I'm talking about. Apologies. Please hold. Oop, million screens. Can you see? Yeah, okay. So for the API governance, this is part of API Manager. So you need to have API Manager, Anypoint Visualizer, everything I showed in Anypoint monitoring, in both in terms of the dashboards and the custom dashboards, alerts, etc., and the incident management stuff like the tracing and the logs. That's all part of Anypoint monitoring. The usage dashboard, I believe everyone has this. Like you should, if you go into the main screen on Anypoint in the dropdown, you should see like a usage dashboard as part of your account. So everyone should have this. And for the telemetry exporter, that is also part of Anypoint monitoring. I will say Cloud Hub 2 RTF at the moment for the anypoint monitoring stuff. It needs to be a Cloud Hub 1, Cloud Hub 2 deployment.
And it looks like Juan followed up on his question. He was talking about requirements in terms of minimum API versions in Cloud Hub 2.0.
Oh, that's a question for Rajesh, I think. I don't actually have an answer to that. I apologize.
Okay, I'm going to make a note, and Juan will make sure to get this answer for you. So the other question is, what are the requirements for usage, such as and it was API versions. Okay. Great. All right, moving on to the next question. Let me find it. Will all of these features be available for hybrid deployments?
I believe so, but it's a while away. I don't know. I think it's definitely part of our conversation. Obviously, we want to support hybrid deployments too. It's eventually will happen, but I don't think it's necessarily the priority as of yet.
And then there's another one. Is there a way to do alerts on error percent instead of count?
I believe so. I think there is. Again, I apologize because I was doing like a screenshot demo, not a live demo, but I think there are ways within the configuration to do that. You just need to play around with it.
And then next one, can the telemetry exporter increase the vCore consumption for an app?
Again, I want to double check. I don't want to get this one wrong. I believe it doesn't, but I don't want to commit to that. Again, I'll check in with Rajesh around that because he'd have the answer.
Awesome. Yeah, Juan, we'll get to all of your technical ones. I'll send you an email follow-up once I have the answers. Another one is the distributed data in the same region like API workers.
Again, a great question. I don't know the answer to that question. I apologize. Rajesh might have known. I'll have to get back to that. Great question, though. I should know the answer probably.
I will say that we will answer that one later. And then I think there was one more in the chat. Diego said, hi, I'm sorry that I missed the first part of the meeting, but we are using OpenTelemetry Exporter since the early days. Did you implement the tracing for other flows like batches, scheduler, Kafka message consuming, Anypoint MQ, SFTP file, etc.?
No, it's not yet. Again, part of the conversation still at the moment. It's just the trace data, the logs, and it's within the realm of telemetry exporter itself within Anypoint monitoring.
Okay, well, that was all of the questions. I just want to say thank you all so much. We do have a couple minutes left. If you have any additional questions you'd like to ask Aston while we have him here. If not, thank you so much for joining. Oh, we have one more. Diego also said, now I can export only around the 10% of traces. Can we export 100% of
Yeah,
traces?
this was answered earlier, actually, Rajit. So I do know the answer to this one because this is a conversation we have a lot of times. Yeah, at the moment, we don't want to give control because there are performance implications, but you're not the first person to bring this up. We have a couple of different customers who are saying, we want all the traces, we want to store all the traces despite that. So stay tuned, watch this space is what Rajesh said. But yeah, I think that's a feature capability that is going to be likely sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Oh, looks like we got another question. Will these recordings be available? Yes. So part 1 and part 2 are already available. You can go, let me just send you the link. You can find all the recordings of the online English group meetups on their website on themeetups.com. Click into the completed event and you can, I'm going to put it in the chat. You can find all of the past events and their recordings in the link I just sent. Part 3 will be made available early next week, but part 1 and part 2 are. They are called Deploy Your Mule and Manage Your Mule. So the first one was held on March 26th, and then the second one was held on April 16th. So you can search for those meetup events. And I know Aston's working on a blog that will include all of the recordings in one location. So hopefully we'll have that out for you towards the end of June, early July as well. Great question. Yeah, and again, we will have another session on Cloud Hub 2.0 in 2 weeks, so be sure to register for that. Jyoti, I did not send the link in the Q&A. I sent it in the chat tab, but let me send it as well in the Q&A tab. Oh, one more from Diego. I'm sorry I did not get if you plan to export traces for schedulers and message consumption or not.
I don't think it's part of the plans as of yet. Of course, we're still going to build on top of, like, we want to expand that feature, but as of, yeah, I don't think so.
Any other questions before we go? Oh, one more. How can the shared vCores be monitored together for CPU JVM as total usage?
As in, like, what features? I believe, like, the usage dashboard kind of stuff. There's also in the anypoint monitoring, we have JVM, like, monitoring capabilities. That's part of the, it's one of the pillars in the dashboard. So yeah, either anypoint monitoring, if you go into it, you can look via CPU and JVM usage, and then yeah, also the usage dashboard as well. You can, which is if you in your drop down of your anypoint profile. Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I believe they're separated. Oh, well, altogether shared. That's your question. I actually don't know. Sorry, that's the limit of my understanding. I apologize again if Rajesh was here. I will have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we'll close out the session for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Aston. Thank you, Rajesh, if you're watching the recording. And we will make sure that this session is shared shortly. Thanks all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much for joining, everyone. Goodbye.